This summer has been strange. Most of the large, big blockbuster movies has been really disappointing. I absolutely hated Men in Black International. Dark Phoenix really did nothing for me at all, and even Godzilla was a big disappointment. There were a few, like Toy Story 4, that ended up shining, and Hobbs and Shaw, even, like, that's a solid popcorn blockbuster movie, but it's the small movies that came out earlier in this summer that really worked for me. Movies like Brightburn, Rocketman, Booksmarts, Yesterday, Crawl, and these smaller movies, smaller budget movies have really been surprising this year, and this is no exception. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is based on a children's book that came out when I was growing up, and I absolutely love those books. I don't think I ever owned all three of them, but I did own one of them. It's the one with the butcher and then the bride who like hid in the coffin or whatever that was. That's the version of the book that I had, and I absolutely loved it. So when I heard about this movie coming out, I got really nervous, but also really excited because, it's a children's property, so they went a PG-13 route, which instantly made me nervous. When you have a PG-13 horror movie, sometimes they just don't work out. Sometimes movies kind of warrant an R-rating movie, and maybe if this one had an R rating, I would have liked it even more. But I think as it is, this is a very fun and entertaining horror movie that is great to cap off the end of the summer. Now, right off the bat, let's get with some of my negatives. I didn't find this movie necessarily too scary. I don't think a lot of you guys will either, which is unfortunate, but I will say that the first half of the movie is much stronger than its second half in terms of scares. Because the first half, it's kind of like an anthology. You're going through different stories from the children's book, and you're kind of bouncing between them, kind of like an anthology, but at the same time, you have that main story tying it all together, but you really just stick with one story at a time. And so the first 2 or 3 stories I actually really, really liked, and I thought they were great. I thought some of them were really creepy, very well done, but towards the end it gets a little bit too CGI, and it's very noticeable, but at the same time I was wrapped up in the story and with these characters, so I didn't mind the last half of this movie that much, but in terms of scares, it is not that great. But the reason why I enjoyed this movie is because I was a fan of the book. I loved seeing some of these stories come to life, and I did recognize a couple of them, and I really did enjoy how they did. It's kind of like Goosebumps. You remember that movie that came out a few years back with Jack Black? I actually really did like that movie. It's a fun, kids movie. Not really scary at all, but this one actually has some really creepy sequences just like the book. I think if you bring kids to this movie, which I think this is definitely the audience that they're going for, it will probably traumatize them, especially like I said, the first half of this movie with some of the stories that they do. It is really, really creepy, and I think the young cast does a great job. I actually liked pretty much all of them in the cast. I think their acting job was pretty good. They sold being scared, and they sold the story, even though it does kind of feel rushed at times. We're like, okay, we're gonna try burning this book, and as the book is bringing all these stories to life, so we're gonna try burn it. Oh, it didn't work, moving on to the next thing. It's not like they had any real conflict when they're trying to figure these things out. Okay, that didn't work, on to the next one. But you did feel that type of rush, every night a story is being written and you don't know who's next. So I think in that aspect, in that way that they use these characters, I thought it was very well in how the book kind of attacks their own personal fears. And I thought that story-wise is where this movie shines. And I think for the most part, this is a very well-directed movie. Andrea Ovredal, who directed this movie, also did The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which is on Netflix, I believe. And I actually really enjoyed this movie as much as I did with that one. So go check out this guy's movies. I'm excited to see what he decides to direct next. If they decide to do another one of these scary stories books, and they decide to adapt one of the later ones, I would love to see the story with the butcher, or the story with the bride in the coffin, and all those different stories from that book and all these other books. And I think that they can really delve deeper into this world, into these different stories, and kind of have fun with it. And so I would say I would recommend this movie to any fan of horror movies, and especially fans of the book. I think if you read the book when you were kids, I think you will absolutely love this movie. I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. But if you're just a casual horror fan, go check it out. It has some pretty decent creepy scares. The story is actually interesting, and the characters are not completely irritating, which is nice. They kind of have that Stranger Things bickering between a couple of them, but it takes place in, I think, the 60s, so it has that nice period feel to it. So I would recommend to any horror fans, to any kids who go see it. Well, honestly, if you're a parent and you have like a 13 or 14-year-old, maybe even a little bit younger, like 10 to 15, I think is the perfect age to traumatize some kids if you're parents out there. So I think this is a good start of horror movie to people out there who are interested in horror movies, or to like my brother who's terrified of everything. Go see this movie. I think it's not too terrifying, but it will get you if you are scared of everything. I think there are a few sequences in this movie that will really get to you, despite some repetitive natures. And I think two of the little stories are very similar. It's the one with the red room and then the one with Harold. I think those two, in terms of how they decide to go with the scares, are very similar, which is kind of why I felt the second half was not as strong as the first. But that is my overall thoughts on Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. If you guys saw the movie, let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. And if you like this review, subscribe to the channel to see more just like this one. So I hope to see you all in my next one.